next week. All right, so let's get started. Just a disclaimer, all contents of this book, unless otherwise stated, are from Creswell. So nothing is from myself or from my own opinion or expertise. By no means I'm not by no means I'm not an expert in these. No. All right. So as I've mentioned before, based on the nature of research problem, the questions that will be asked to address the problem, and also its accompanying review, right, of the literature that establishes the importance, no, of the problem. The research chooses either quantitative or qualitative research track. So the problem, the questions, even the literature review help, no, to steer actually, no, help to steer um, the researcher toward either the quantitative or the qualitative track. So this in turn inform specific research design to be used, the procedures involved in them, such as sampling, data collection, instruments or protocols, the procedures, data analysis, and the final interpretation of the results. So, um, so as you can see here, we discussed already the research process. So we start off, according to Creswell, we start off with identifying the research problem or the problem in general. And we have to review the literature so that we will not be duplicating, or we would to clarify what the definitions are, and or what the literature says about a problem. Is it a problem or not a problem? And then we formulate the purpose of our research, where in our purpose we stipulate exactly what are our research questions, and also what our hypotheses are, right? So that's our process. So from these research questions and purposes of our research, we can identify already whether a research is quantitative and qualitative. So when we identify whether or not it's quantitative or qualitative, it's easier then to identify what kind of research design are we going to employ in our research. So in this particular part of the research, I don't know if you can see the cursor, but I'm pointing at the box on the side, the quantitative design, the combined designs, and the qualitative design. So let me go over these designs very quickly. So an experimental design is one of the major quantitative designs where we we introduce, okay, we introduce an intervention to a particular group and investigate whether an intervention actually helps. But a true experimental setup would always have a control group. So a control group does not have any intervention. The experimental group, that's where we get the experimental design from, gets that intervention or that new approach or whatever, and then we compare after such intervention or without intervention whether or not there has been an increase in the experimental or a decrease in the experimental group. So that's an experimental design. I think many of you, especially in the areas of pure sciences, have these experimental setups done, especially in the naturalistic sciences. The next would be a correlation. So if you can remember your high school direct variation, direct variation is a concept where two related variables, for example, say number of people in a classroom and ang iyang kaigang, or the temperature, the atmosphere or the temperature in the room, right? So if you are the only one in the room is spacious and the air flows quite greatly. So it's not as igang, or it's not as hot, no? You don't feel hot at all if you're the only one, unless the room is like really hot. But in a constant room with a constant temperature, if you increase the number of people that are staying there, there is also an increase, right? So an obvious increase in the temperature of the room as well, because all of you are now breathing carbon dioxide, which basically is a receptor for heat. So that being said, it means to say that variable, which is the temperature, is highly affected by the number of people. So as the number of people increases, the average temperature of a room also increases. So in that way, we can say that the data for the number of people highly correlates or correlates positively with with the average room temperature. Another quantitative design would be surveys. Surveys is a descriptive research or a descriptive approach where you want to describe the whole of the population. So yeah, and that's what the survey is. So basically, it's very quantitative. You basically just describe how much of that group has these characteristics or that characteristics or that preference or this preference. That's survey. Qualitative designs is a little bit more different. Of course, it's naturally different from quantitative designs. That's why they're distinguished from one another. Qualitative designs, for example, grounded theory is a design where you generate a theory by going about large data sets. So, for example, I've heard a dissertation. Uh, I think, if I'm not mistaken, from Dr. Rabi Laviles, the dean of College of Computer Studies. His theory is grounded. Um, his dissertation is basically grounded theory, where he actually interviews freelancers, okay, freelancers in the field of IT and computer science. So, as he interviews uh, a lot of um, a lot of freelancers, from beginners to veterans freelancers, he was able to come up with a general theory of the development of a beginning freelancer to become a veteran freelancer. And he was able to name that theory. No, he was able to make use of musical related terms such as gigs, right? You have, say, starter, and you have a rock star as terms to describe, no, the characteristics or the general theory of how freelancers in the computer science and IT actually evolves, no, from one state of freelancing to a higher state of freelancing. So that's how he got that. He interviewed a lot of Filipino freelancers all over the Philippines until he was able to, like, get that peak saturated data to, like, come up with that particular theory. Another is ethnography. Ethnography basically is immersing yourself in a particular ethnic group or culture. No, it's where you be able to identify the meanings that they imbibe in particular practices, which is different from what we usually understand, right? So that's basically ethnography. You basically immerse yourself in that particular place. Another is narrative. Narrative basically is simply describing in a qualitative manner a person, a place, or a phenomena, where you kind of like a very important person, very important phenomena, very important event, something like that. So all these things, you will have to be able to distinguish sampling techniques, instruments or protocols, even data analyses and their interpretations, and how you draw discussions, conclusions, limitations, and future research differs significantly for quantitative versus qualitative research designs. So if you take quantitative and mix that with qualitative designs, you get to see mixed methods and action research. So I think I will not discuss more of the combined design. Basically, it's just a combination of both, right?